Welcome everybody to our WhyTry webinar. Very happy to be on with you today, to be back with you today, and very happy for the subject matter that we have and the group of panelists that we have today. Bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think there's going to be some great pieces for us to consider as we go back to our main work. So my name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. I will be the webinar host, moderator today, and I'll introduce the subject and our panelists momentarily. Let me first just briefly introduce our organization and what the expectation for the webinar today will be. I represent the WhyTry organization. We are the organization that gets to host these. I've hosted close to 100 of these. We started them in 2020, and they've become a really great space to discuss, I think, really important ideas and concepts that impact education, both educators and students, as well as interacting with the world of mental health. Our organization specializes in the topic of resilience. That's what we help people teach. We help organizations teach their students and their clients specific skills of resilience, and we have a model for that. But this webinar we use as a platform to discuss really some of the important ideas of the day that are impacting educators, and it's become a really fun space. With this particular webinar, we are also co-presenting with the National Alternative Education Association. Really excited every time we get to partner up with them. We've been able to partner up with them for going on 2 years now, and we've done a lot of really great webinars in conjunction with them. And so really grateful to be able to collaborate with them for their support and to also be able to support them. So I want to shout them out. This is happening live. We have a live chat here. We are on a webinar link. So the four of us panelists are the only ones with live cameras and live microphones. The rest of you attending live, we can't see you and we can't hear you, but we can hear from you in the chat. So if you do have questions or comments as we go throughout the session today, feel free to speak up in the chat. There's one thing that you want to check if you're going to comment in the chat. If you open up the chat box where you type in a comment, right above where you type your comment, it says to, and then there's a little drop down arrow. That should say to everyone. That's where you select who can see your comment. If that does not say to everyone, then not everybody is going to be able to see your comment. So make sure that says to everyone. And then after you have made that adjustment, let's just do our regular check-in. Just hit us with an emoji. Let us know how your week's going so far. It's Thursday in the last week of February. So this is a very adventurous time in education. So type an emoji into the chat that lets us know how you're doing, how you're holding up. We're seeing it all. Oh, I love it. I can empathize with all of them, and the feelings we have at this point in the year often are complex. So multiple emojis are certainly apropos. Thank you for doing that. Last note on the webinar, we're scheduled to go for about an hour. That's the plan. By the way, FYI, Kobe and Beth, I saw your responses in there. You send those to hosts and panelists. So just an FYI, if you want others to be able to see it, make sure that says to everyone. It's a tricky thing, and for some reason it defaults for some people to hosts and panelists. All right, well, welcome everybody. My name's Jason Johnson. Very excited, as I mentioned, for what we're going to be discussing today. The topic at hand is going to be revolving around the topic of student engagement and student belonging, trying to re-engage disconnected students, what actually improves things like attendance, behavior, and school climate, and specifically how the topic of belonging, it influences that. And I'm really excited to dig into it. We have three incredible panelists today. All three are from the National Alternative Education Association, representing different capacities within their board. All three are also principals and bring some really, really great experience. We are thrilled to have Dr. Kobe Davis, a principal of Archer Learning Center, veteran educator with 25 years of experience spanning childhood and adult learning, former professor, behavior interventionist, specializes in equipping teachers with confidence to implement modern instructional techniques beyond the classroom. Dr. Davis is a dedicated community advocate, currently serving as president of the Northwest Arkansas NAACP and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Inc. He's a recognized leader in the field, frequent speaker at national conferences, and also happens to be the president of the NAEA. Welcome, Kobe. Very happy to have you. Next, we have Dr. Mark Brown. Dr. Brown has over 25 years of experience in the field of education, with 22 years of administrative leadership in Maryland and the District of Columbia in Pennsylvania. Devoted considerable effort towards enriching his academic and professional development, and currently possesses a doctor of education degree specializing in urban leadership, and has completed all but dissertation for a second doctor of education degree, the infamous ABD in special education with a focus on emotional behavior. In addition, he holds degrees in criminology and criminal justice and adult education, specializing in administration and special education. Very, very unique individual with great perspective. Also is the president-elect of the NAEA. Very excited about that, and very happy to have you. This is your second time, I believe, being on here. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And I should have mentioned, this is Kobe's at least third, possibly fourth time, or is it number 5? I've lost track, Kobe.
I think I work for WhyTry.
We love it. And we're happy to have it. And then last but not least, we have Beth Blatt, been a member of the NAEA for the last 6 years, has taught for 30 years, both at the elementary and middle school levels. For the past 8 years, she's been serving as the principal of the Heart Mountain Academy and assistant principal at Cody High School in Cody, Wyoming, where she lives with her family. Heart Mountain Academy is an NAEA exemplary practices cohort school, which has helped staff in school learn and grow to become what is best for students. She believes that alternative schools can open doors of opportunities in student-centered, innovative ways. Collaborating with colleagues through the NAEA has opened doors for her staff to learn and explore. Beth also serves as the Region 7 director for the NAEA, and we are so thrilled to have you here. Beth, this is your first time on as a panelist. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So with that, let's, and then I'm Jason Johnson. I'm the director of training for the WhyTry organization, former school psychologist, and fortunate person that gets to host these webinars. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do. So in prepping for this, you all had some interesting insight around the topics we're going to dig into. And one of the common themes was this idea of belonging. And so I want to just jump right into it and talk about what you think about belonging in your schools. Like, maybe define it a little bit. What does it mean? How do you consider it or define it within your school? What does it look like for students? And how is it maybe different from just simply having requesting compliance or presence, I guess, from your students? What are we talking about when we dig into belonging? Let's go in this order. Let's hear from Mark, Kobe, then Beth.
Sure. So I definitely appreciate the question. For me, when I think about belonging, I really think about ownership that students have in the environment that they're being educated. I think it's really important that all students, when they come into your building, or students who are returning and have been there for a while, that their imprint is within your building, because that builds a level of trust that you have in them and trust that they have in you. I think that a lot of times one of the pitfalls that we have is that we try to fit the students into existing structures rather than build structures that are around them. As educators and adults, we have a tendency to kind of think that we know what's best for our students based on our experiences and things that we our research and what education has taught us. And we don't really hear students out as much because we're kind of putting them into what we think should be the square peg, so to speak. So really just kind of bringing out an environment where it's their environment. We're living in their environment, not they're living in our environment, so to speak.
I love that. Thank you, Kobe.
Yeah, you asked specifically about how is it different than compliance and being physically present. And I believe that without belonging, we don't get true compliance and even presence. So attendance is impacted also by belonging. So, in our schools, we realize that we have to have relationships to help students know that belonging can exist. And so once they have relationships, they have that connected person in our building, that's when students start feeling more comfortable and hence leads to the compliance and just being there more often.
Nice. How about you, Beth?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think belonging is the difference between students just surviving and going to school because they have to, and actually having students reconnect to their learning and being a part of something that feels like they belong. So what that might look and feel like is instead of a kid with his hoodie on in the back choosing to sit in isolation, he's now in a group with students. Maybe you have an activity where students are engaging and walking around and actually being inclusive. I think you see that in a school that creates that sense of belonging, because belonging is relational, just like the gentlemen have said. And that to me comes before the academics before you can achieve academically.
I love it. I'm always taking notes whenever the panelists are speaking, and some of the terms I've written down are leaving an imprint. I think is a really impressive way to consider that. And then that reconnection piece. So to take it a little bit further, what I would love to hear from is maybe a couple things. First of all, let's maybe explore. Well, let's do this. I'm going to switch up the order of how I wanted to ask these. Let's talk first, like, how do you gauge? What's the measurement? Is this just an eye test, or is there a quantifiable way that you can try to measure it, belonging? What are you looking for when you're really trying to do that? And then I want to dig a little bit further into like what the actual impact of this might be. Let's go for this one. Let's go Kobe, Beth, then Mark.
But so when I read that question originally, Jason, I was thinking about how we even got to the conversation of what we needed to be doing in our school. So we use restorative practices in our school. And so we do these senior circles where we sit with seniors and we basically just in that circle talk about, are they doing the things that they need to be doing to prepare for what's next in their life? And in that circle, we asked lots of different questions, but one of the questions specifically was about, if you need anything, do you know who you can go to in our building to address that need? And we were surprised that when we first started doing these, a third or more of our students did not have a person in the building. They didn't have anyone that they felt comfortable going to with whatever questions and concerns they had. And so that right there was the beginning of a conversation that we started having about what does really knowing that you have a space in our space look like? And so I think it's hard to gauge because you really have to have people tell you. Like, I think there's some things we can see. I mean, kids who come to school regularly, kids that are involved in things, and there's all this research about involvement in activities and extracurricular and those kinds of things. We know those kids are probably okay and they feel like they belong, but some of them could too also be hidden, not belonging, just kind of going through the motions. And so it gets difficult always figuring out But restorative practices for us has opened so many doors to better knowing our students and knowing what they're really thinking and feeling. Because once you start talking in a conversation in a circle, many times students will tell exactly what we need to know. And that's what we have used as a tool. It's not, it's very anecdotal, but very effective.
I love that. And I suspect restorative practices will come up multiple times in the discussion today. And I know we have some people on here that maybe that concept or that model is new to them. But it is a model that I think if you're unfamiliar with it, you should look into it a little bit. There's some really cool stuff that comes from. I'm curious, Kobe, when you said you have senior circles, do you take all of your seniors? Do they all participate weekly in those senior circles then?
No, not weekly. No, we're a pretty large alternative school. So we have about 175 seniors. So we typically do twice in the year that every single senior goes through a circle. And so you're only able to do about 5 to 6 kids at a time.
Mhm.
And so you can see how it takes a very long time to get through all of those kids. And so every kid gets 2 senior circles, one at the beginning of the year, kind of to scope out what do I need to do? What have I not been thinking about? And then kind of more like an exit senior circle near the end of the year.
And so as leadership, you have to be a little bit strategic in how you're like you're doing the math as you go to make sure you're getting all your seniors through it. Nice. I love it. Yeah. Beth, how about you? How do you, how at your school, how do you gauge or measure that concept of belonging?
Yeah, I think it's both something that you can feel in the building, but you need to intentionally monitor it. So I think one way is through like attendance trends. We have students that have poor attendance, and if they don't feel connected or a sense of belonging, it's really easy not to come back to school, and then they dig themselves in a hole, and it's really hard to come back. There's shame and blame and all kinds of things that happen with that. But you'll see if you have a sense of belonging, which is part of your school culture, they'll come back and they'll actually gain that resilience because they know, just like Colby said too, that there's an adult that cares. There also is accountability and expectation when you belong to a community. So I think that's something that we measure. Engagement too. If you go into a classroom and kids are engaged in the learning and asking questions. And another big piece of belonging that we've seen is not being afraid to fail, because there's an amount of dignity and respect when you have a sense of belonging within a community. That peer-to-peer interaction changes if you put belonging on the forefront of your climate and culture.
Nice. So it sounds like you need to have a kind of a unified leadership on that as well, kind of understanding your purpose through belonging and what you're looking for, what you're trying to identify within that.
Yeah, absolutely. And behavior is another one. You can look at behavior data. It's something that all schools look at. But once again, you can look and see a student that is disengaged and it's like, just suspend me, or a student that where there's resilience that's created. And instead of walking out, they realize that there's accountability and an expectation, and we still care about you. This mistake is something that can be repaired.
Nice. Mark, how about you? What are you looking for at your school there? How are you gauging or measuring this idea of belonging?
So one of the things that we do is we identify learnable moments. So we start out at the beginning of the school year, and a lot of times, while it is value in how students perceive themselves, we also want to know how other people are perceiving them. So at the beginning of every quarter, we kind of have them identify, the staff identify, the parents identify, as well as the students identify, just some one word phrases in terms of things that they think they do well, things that they like to improve upon, whether it's confidence, whether it's grit, whether it's resiliency, things of that nature. And after they identify those terms throughout the course of the year, when certain situations arise, whether positive or negative or we treat them as learnable moments to see whether or not they've actually made progress in that moment compared to how they may have responded previously. And that kind of gives us some qualitative data in terms of whether or not they're making progress. Baby steps is still progress in terms of, and whether or not they feel like the school environment is contributing to them letting down their guard, so to speak, and be available for learning, whether it be from a behavioral standpoint or academic standpoint. So those are just some of the things that we kind of do. I'm also a pragmatist, so I know that at the end of the day, it's we often talk about we can smell things, we can feel things. I also know that my boss wants quantifiable data. They want quantitative data. So really looking at how we can link some of those learnable moments to the actual academic achievement that's they're going to experience moving forward, whether it's just credit recovery, credit attainment, whether it's actually moving from a D to a C, things of that nature, to be able to present to my bosses that it's not just us talking about it because we live in the moment with our students, but here's some actual data that they can kind of look at and say, we're actually doing what we say we're going to do as a non-traditional school.
I love that. And I'm curious. So I love that idea of trying to measure those learnable moments. You say you have staff, parents, and students write down at the beginning of the year. Is that like an intake form that you have everybody fill out?
No, at the beginning of the year, we actually during initial meetings with those individuals, and it's more of an organic. We have a social worker, we might have a guidance counselor, we have an administrator, and we just kind of, it's a casual talk about how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself, how your parents perceive you. Sometimes we include someone from the community in terms of how they perceive you, and then identify one word strengths, one word areas of improvement. And those are kind of your individual student plan for that student to kind of work on those things and to look for situations that happen organically throughout the school year where they can demonstrate progress. And sometimes it's a step backward just to make 2 steps forward the next quarter.
Love that. That's such a cool way to do it. And I think it's such a, you're doing it that way starts to maybe scratch the surface a little bit on some self-awareness sometimes that could be a struggle when you have people identify like multiple data points identifying those strengths and those things you can focus on. It's a really nice way to align energy, but also to start to understand, because I think that's tricky for probably every human, but in particular, it can be tricky for young people to recognize that the people around them may be seeing them very differently than, perhaps how they're seeing themselves. And so that's like a really interesting step into the idea of, being a community member and what is actually empathy in this kind of collective approach to it. That's awesome. A lot of them have been covered. Attendance has come up a few times, behavior. This one I'll just throw out to the group. You can all kind of speak up if you have any other things. What are any other things that you can think of that you feel like are directly impacted when students don't feel a sense of belonging? Or are there other things that you have a tendency to see or can look for?
Well, I'll hop in there. I know that a lot of times in my experience, when students don't feel like they belong, it kind of, some of their ACEs reemerge and their ACEs are magnified in terms of the adverse childhood experiences. And it makes them relive certain experiences that they've had in the past, or they've observed in the past. Um, so when they don't feel they belong, some things get magnified instead of being mitigated. And I think that we have an obligation to kind of create an environment where some of those ACEs are being mitigated by how we interact in the structures that we put into schools rather than make them worse. And I always kind of keep in mind, they're not going to be with me forever. So I have an obligation that extends beyond their time just with me, and to kind of help with some of the healing, help with some of and we talk about the restorative aspect, because I know Dr. Davis mentioned restorative, but sometimes it's also, I'm going to infuse something that you didn't have to begin with, or you might not have been aware of to begin with. So it's not always the restoring. Sometimes we're helping build upon something that they didn't feel they had, or they didn't feel they could accomplish to begin with.
Nice.
Right. And to piggyback on that, I mean, I think that that relationship piece is key. So another thing that we do, especially January and February, get pretty long at the high school level, but every level. And so we do this 2 and 10. So 2 minutes with a student for 10 days in a row. And you just talk to a student, really just re-engage them. So that not only students have a voice, but it's really this personal one-on-one connection, just reestablishing, because it's so easy over time just to get disconnected and once again, just do school. Just sit there and get versus no, I'm part of a bigger picture. And there's caring and compassion there. And so that 2 and 10 rule is a great little quick strategy to use.
2 and 10 rule. I love it. Writing a couple notes down. Madeline in the chat brings up the important piece as well. There's like, when it comes to belonging, it's really highlighting a sense of connectedness. Like, do we feel connected to a caring adult if we're a student? But then there's also the element of, are we feeling connected to other students as well? And I think all of that certainly can impact it. And I love the ideas that are being exchanged. I would love what Dr. Brown presented, I think, leads us nicely to where I wanted to go next. And I think this is where I'm so appreciative of your experience. So if it wasn't clear at the beginning, I mentioned all three of you are principals, but you all work in alternative settings, alternative schools. And I feel like we have so much we can learn from our alternative school educators, because you're dealing with a lot of student challenges. There's students in many cases that have struggled to make it work in a traditional school setting, or have had some type of experience or thing that happened that prevents them from being able to attend a regular or a traditional school setting. And so they end up in your schools. And in many cases, you have students that bring to school, their own kind of unique baggage. Perhaps they've experienced significant adversity or trauma. And then in addition to that, all of us, regardless of the type of school we're in, also are navigating the world of discipline. We do have the reality of having to administer and participate in discipline when certain lines are crossed as well. And so, the idea of restoration or these restorative models have come into place. But I'm curious, as we talk through that, how does belonging fit into that formula when you're either having to administer discipline, or if you're in a restorative model, when you're working towards that restoration for the student? What role does belonging play in that, particularly after harm or conflict or one of those? Because these things happen at every school, and so we all have to deal with it. But I've always appreciated the perspective that educators from alternative settings have on this, because I just feel like in a lot of cases you're pretty masterful at dealing with this. So let's go first. Let's start with Beth, then we'll go Mark, then Kobe.
Yeah, I think to add belonging to and the restorative practices is how we approach discipline. It's the foundation of it. And once again, to add in that dignity. I mean, we interpret behavior through like connection and not control. And that's what part of the restorative process is. Figure it out, fix it, check it, and then have that follow through also with teachers. I think sometimes we hit discipline in an area off to the side, and then we check box it. Well, that's not the way that works. That's not how you bring trust back in, and even giving students opportunity to come back into the classroom knowing that something happened or they broke a rule. And so when you look at education, K-12, we are growing these beautiful adult humans, and we're going to make mistakes, and we need to let students know that it's okay, and then teach them those steps on how to come back in and be part of a community again.
Nice. Dr. Brown.
So I think that one of the things when it comes down to discipline is that when students feel a sense of belonging, they trust that the discipline is appropriate. They trust that you're acting in their best interest moving forward to help them to either develop certain skills to handle situations in a more positive way moving forward. Um, and it also brings about, these are some of the natural consequences that come with certain infractions. And I think that when students feel a sense of belonging in your school or within a specific setting, a lot of times they're more accepting of the discipline, despite, not to say they ain't gonna push back. This is still non-traditional, and no one likes the idea of having to go um, to possibly be in some level of isolation or suspension. No one likes that idea, but they also understand that certain things, there's a response that comes with it. And, I constantly talk to, my staff when it comes down to belonging, that typically discipline, it usually falls into either you're trying to punish them because it was so significant that punishment is warranted, deterrence for future behavior so that either the student doesn't do it or other students don't repeat the behavior. You're trying to rehabilitate, or it was so egregious that they need to be an out of school suspension for isolation. Well, just understanding that no matter which form you take, there needs to be a positive spin on it that is going to make that student better moving forward, because we're not always going to be around. I always think in the back of my head, if I'm not around, how are you going to respond moving forward as a young person? So that should always, and that we preach that to students, and we preach that to the parents, and we preach that to our staff, and that we have to instill a sense of self accountability. And with self accountability, they're more likely to make the appropriate choice moving forward.
I love that. Really, really wise. Dr. Davis.
Yeah, I mean, they said a lot of what I was thinking about, but there was a couple words that I think probably drive me the most. Ms. Black talked about this idea of dignity, and in interacting with students in difficult times, it is very important that we are respectful of them as humans, as people. That just because you messed up, it doesn't mean that you're less or you deserve less. Um, and Dr. Brown is right. I mean, trust plays such a major part in truly creating this sense of belonging in our community. And so I really want to emphasize in the culture that I'm a part of is that everyone has a place because they deserve it, not because they earned it. You're a human and you deserve a place here. And because you deserve a place, it's not because you did anything right. It's not because you're perfect. It's just because we all deserve a place. We all deserve that safety and that support. And just like we don't take lunch from kids who make bad choices, we don't take a sense of belonging and kind of acceptance because you've made bad choices. My mentor, when I was learning to be an administrator, I watched him expel a student, and the student and the parent shook his hand and hugged him as they were leaving. He expelled them from school for a disciplinary action and ended with a hug and a handshake. And I saw that and I thought, that's when you have created the appropriate culture with kids and families, that they know that even when we have to have difficult conversations, I still care about you and I still want what's best for you, even though this is the decision I have to make in this moment. And so I think that's when we probably do it right, is when people know that, hey, me having a consequence has nothing to do with me accepting you and wanting good for you.
I love that. It made me think, that story, Kobe, it reminded me. So we teach a concept that in the language of WhyTry, we're very relationship focused. And we teach a concept that we call surrendering the one up. And it's this concept, I'll put the definition up here. It's this idea. So here's the base definition. Surrendering the one-up relationship is a set of specific strategies that help educators build authentic, unconditional relationships that help all students feel understood, valued, and safe. When done effectively, it's the X factor for motivating all students to action and seeing their potential. But essentially, it's this process of trying to intentionally help every student feel value and worth. And it doesn't mean we sacrifice boundaries or expectations or rules or accountability. But it does mean that we really try to help every individual student feel value and worth. And when students feel different around us, they tend to respond different to us. And it can even improve discipline. Your story made me think. I remember I had one of the toughest students I ever worked with, conduct disorder and a lot of behavior challenges, and was just kind of intentionally defiant. And I was the only grown up in the building that this kiddo would respond to. And it all started because I would let him sit. I had a fancy leather chair in my office, and I would let him sit in my chair when we would meet. And he liked it. It made him feel cool. And so even if there was like a moment of discipline, he'd sit in my chair and I'd sit in the beat up metal chair. And he would respond to me. And I know it was in part because he felt a difference around me. But I specifically remember, and it kind of blew my mind at the moment. But looking back, I think it is that relationship piece. We had a moment of discipline. He did a thing that required discipline. It was a pretty ugly situation that turned violent between he and another student. And we had to get the police involved. And as we were walking off, we would always greet each other with a kind of an old school dap, and saw him, and he was getting ready to leave with the police. And he held his fist out, and I dapped him up. And I said, "I love you, buddy. I'm looking forward to when you're back, and we're gonna work through it." And he accepted the discipline and kind of moved forward into the discipline. But we still had this really meaningful exchange, even though I was I was the one that had made the call. I was part of a discipline that was going to complicate his life. And so when that connection is there, I think it does. It even allows you to discipline in a way that can feel different. And it does, as Beth mentioned, it maintains that dignity. I'm curious. I want to hear from our attendees, those that are in attendance, just kind of in the spirit of this discussion. Type into the chat any simple practice that you do that you feel like is effective at helping your students feel value and worth when they're around you. These things are really worth sharing and collaborating, I think. What's something that you do that you feel like is effective at helping your students feel value or worth when they're around you? Sometimes the simpler, the better. But all of this stuff, I think, contributes so nicely, so importantly to the culture and the climate within our schools. Walk and talks through the halls, yes. Standing at the entrance, yes. Greet them, offer them water bottle when they walk in. That's awesome. Let the students talk without interruptions, no matter the situation. Listening is huge. Knowledge in all environments, including in their lives, like outside of the classroom, right? Asking about a recent game, yes. Normalize their feelings. Talk about the things they like. These are awesome. These are so good. Walking by every morning, giving fist bumps. Fist bumps are valuable, man. Those things are priceless. Checking in to see how they're doing. I love it. Nice. It's a nice lead in. We've heard from some of our attendees, so I want to hear from our principals now. What are some things that you do to kind of intentionally create space for student voice, leadership, choice, anything within the school to kind of empower students and help them feel a little bit different? What are you doing in your schools? Let's go Mark, then Kobe, then Beth.
Sure. So I did want to kind of just briefly touch on in terms of one of the things to kind of build the value and worth is we kind of have things set up where, and this is coordinated with parents to attend at least one event outside of the school with that student. So there's different teams that rotate where there's at least 5 of us that just showing up, whether it be at a football game, whether it be at a birthday party, whether it be something where 5 of us would go out. And I know it's somewhat difficult in larger schools potentially with a large student population, but just so they can see that you care about them outside of a paycheck. Because oftentimes we hear students think that this is just all about a paycheck. You don't really care about me outside of 4 o'clock each day or whatever time may be. So for them to actually see us present and showing up for them in situations that have nothing to do per se with school.
So good.
So I just wanted to kind of infuse that. So
Thank you.
Can you repeat the
Yeah, I'm so happy. I'm so happy you added that to the list. That's such a good one. What are you doing to intentionally create space? You know, some of the things that have come up have been like people have mentioned in the chat, the importance of listening to students. How do you create space for students to have a voice within your buildings, or to have leadership opportunities, or to even have the opportunity to exercise some choice in whatever is going on? How do you create that space in your schools?
Well, I think one thing is to really have, at least in my experience, be intentional with allowing students to be part of, whether it be building the schedule, part of some of the
Mm.
natural consequences that come across for certain infractions, whether it be helping build the award ceremony, or whether it be school dance, or what have you. So actually including them in the planning process, because I think so often we think we know it all. We want, as adults, no, this is how it's going to be done, and we want it done this way, and this is because we have the life experience and all that, but we haven't walked in their shoes. So specifically and intentionally reaching out for their input. Sometimes it actually surprises them that you actually want to hear from them. Well, absolutely, and actually implementing some of the ideas they have, even if it's I know we have at least one lesson a quarter where students plan that academic lesson with the teacher. So instead of dictating to them, how that lesson gets run, it's kind of built with the student in mind in terms of the student's ideas of how to teach that concept, Pythagorean theory, or whatever it may be. I'm a math guy. So I think that's really important, especially on the academic side as well.
I love that. That's a great idea. One academic lesson a quarter, I think is what you said. That's incredible. Kobe, how about you? What are you doing in your school to create space for greater student voice, leadership, choice, etc.?
Yeah, I kind of want to answer this question maybe differently than you intended. So this is the Kobe going off rails slightly, Jason.
For the record, my favorite Kobe. This is what I'm here for.
So some people put in the comments things about like letting students have voice, letting them finish without interruption, and letting them and valuing their thoughts and their feelings. That's something that I think we as adults struggle a lot with. And so we've been very intentional about that, and even practicing together with my team about how do you just be a listener? Because we don't do that well. We're not really good listeners. We always want to kind of explain. And we do a lot of, what is it? What do the people say? Mansplaining, where we tell people what they think and how they feel. And we do that so often. And so we've had to practice it because I think we all know that that is a good practice, but I don't know that we all know how to truly do it. I don't know that we know how to truly listen and hear our kids and then hear it through bigger lens than just what the words they say. Our kids have full lives and lots of experiences that have colored what they say. And so if we don't listen through that lens of all of who they are and what they bring to the table, we're not really hearing them. And so we've practiced that a lot. And it's really great when there are these times when we do a staffing once a week with our students, and we'll talk about things. And it's so cool when we'll bring up a story about a kid and someone will be like, oh, I'm so frustrated with that kid. And somebody else will say, well, did you know this about them? And then all of a sudden, everything feels very different than it did before, because you're now able to listen to that kid through the lens of truly understanding what brings them to the things that they say and the things that they do. And so I would just say we've got to really work hard at what does listening look like? What does allowing them to speak truly mean? And how do we hear where they're really coming from? And that doesn't work if we don't truly get to know them. But anyway. So sorry, I kind of went off rails slightly, but yes.
Kobe, you're always so nice. You always apologize for going off rails, and then you always proceed to say one of my favorite things that I hear. I'm curious. I'm going to put you back on the spot. I'm going to turn it back on you. I teach a thing called resilient listening. It's kind of a play on like what some would describe as like deep listening or compassionate listening, because I do have this belief that we humans do have a tendency to be better at speaking than at listening. And real listening is really hard. Can you give just like a very brief, like what does your practice look like? Because this is such a, like, this is a big deal. I want to spend a whole
No. You ask
digging
people
into this
questions. You ask people questions that you kind of already know the answers to. So like, for example, I have a teacher in my building who is a staunch Republican and he has very conservative views. And so we ask him a question about something we already know. And then we all listen to how he responds. And then we talk through what all is being said in that. And so we break it apart. Like you break it apart and you talk through all of the components. Well, he grew up here and this is what his life looks like. And he has this many kids and he goes to this church and he voted this way in 2004 and like all of the things. And we start realizing that none of that stuff makes sense if you don't start thinking about all of the person that they are. And, it's also interesting, and I'm super bad about this. And so I try to keep my answers short and I'm not good at it. But people glaze over after so many words. I wish I knew what the number was. Like there's a word count when people just start glazing over and they don't hear anything anymore. My wife probably knows that number because very often she'll go, "You're not listening anymore, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I missed it. I don't know what you said." And so, but people do that. And so we have to also be thoughtful of that component as well. Like I'm about to start glazing over. How do I continue to stay engaged? And so I know. And so I always respond to students' things with, "Here's what I thought I heard you say. Please correct me if I am wrong, because this is what I understood." And I want them to know that I am trying to hear you completely. And if I'm not saying what you're saying, fix it for me. Help me see what it was you were trying to say. And that's been really helpful as well. Like, it really keeps me out of a lot of trouble with a lot of people when I just say, "Okay, well, what I heard was this." And then that way I know we're speaking the same language at least before I respond.
Yeah, the art of the restate is a really effective way to do that. Thank you for sharing. And tip my hat to you, because the scenario you described with your staff, that's clearly you've created a sense of safety for your staff to be willing to engage in that practice, because that requires some disclosure. So awesome job with that. Beth, love to hear from you. What are some of the things you do in your school to try to create that space for student voice, student leadership, choice opportunities for them?
Yeah, I'm going to try to blend these two things here from our last two presenters, but student voice is so important, and we say it a lot. I've seen adults, and I'm guilty of it too, where we ask students questions and they give us a good idea, and then we as the adults run with it and we leave them behind. And in order to have that sense of belonging, the next question would be, what does that look like? How do you envision that? And get the students involved. Because it is so easy as adults to do school to students, not with students. And so really that voice also without follow through, you can ask, you can do your surveys, but without that follow through or without action behind it, action actually strengthens student voice. Otherwise, you can ask and do your surveys, but if you don't act on it, then students they stop giving us that information. And so some examples, I'm going to go in a completely different direction, is that leadership, for at least in my experience, is community service work that my school has done. We have an Adopt a Highway that the students actually wanted to initiate. And so we do that for the community. So branding and a sense of pride is really important to add that belonging and connection to our students that a lot of times aren't seen and heard in other venues. We've done food drives where students have come up and said, "Hey, the Elks Club is doing this for this unique, set of people in our community, but what about these guys? What can we do?" Well, what does that look like? And then they start talking about it, and we initiate it as a staff. And so I think that is really built our leadership capacity for students. We had another situation is we do every Friday, we have a family meeting. And we talk about values. So every month we have a big heading of what our values are selected by students, and students get wolf tags because we are wolves. and they get recognized. Once again, this is all through student voice. They said, can we have a badge, or what does this look like? Can we work toward this? Can we look for that in each other? And we're on year 2, and it's amazing. You'll see our kids with their hats on with all these wolf tags of different colors, from optimism to responsibility. Another one is actually songs. Kids love songs. And so when we are, students want to play their music, we don't have phones in the classroom, but they sit over to the side. And so if we're teaching empathy, we will do an empathy playlist, and every student will be able to put this onto a playlist. We put the QR code by the end of the day all over the school, and students will be using those playlists. And so that is just another idea to build capacity in that sense of belonging, community, respect, and responsibility. And then one more, our students, were saying that their elective classes, this is at the high school level, they were boring. The online classes, there was no interaction, no engagement. Even though they were in their wheelhouse of maybe from farming to forestry to criminology, they just didn't feel engaged. And so our team got together, our staff got together and said, okay, we asked the students, what would that look like? We ran a list together and went back and forth, and we now have these classes called intentional living. And that has actually helped our absenteeism after lunch. We have seen a dramatic, actually 56% increase of students that come back on time, which is incredible because we have a very short lunch period off campus, because they want to be there because they helped create those classes.
So good. But I know we're going to have some people that have follow-up questions. I'm going to put up contact info at the end of our panelists. And so if you have a direct question about any of the practices they've mentioned, I love the playlist. I got so pumped up when you talked about like a playlist about empathy. It's one of my favorite things I used to do. And I add my endorsement to that. Creating playlists with your students connected to your topic is such a fun and such a powerful way to kind of reinforce the concept. And it can lead to some really thoughtful discussion. I'm curious, I want to hear from you now, because this is a nice luxury to have three principals on. What are some of the important leadership moves that you make? Because this does require some buy-in within your schools to make these type of practices work, and to really reinforce and be aligned on this concept of belonging. So what are some of the leadership moves that you make to try to build a culture of belonging across your entire school, so that it's not just happening in individual classrooms? Let's go Kobe, then Beth, then Mark.
So kind of an interesting thing about my own personal situation is I've been at my school now for 11 years. So everyone who works here, essentially I've hired. So this is completely my team. The school, I know everybody here. Sorry, that's the school bell. And and so I've known them all since the very beginning. And so it truly kind of helps in lots of ways. So they know me, they know how I work, they know how I think and how I kind of my expectations and such. And so we've been building this literally in my entire time. And we did some work with trauma-informed schools. And one of the things that we kind of brought back from that training and has been really beneficial for us is, and just kind of how we played it out, is this idea of everyone needs a canoe, and who's in your canoe and what role do you play in the canoe. And so when we started school this year, we gave everyone a wooden canoe, and they had to write on their canoe who was in their canoe on our team. And we even talked about what it was like for adults if you don't have anyone in your canoe. And why do you not have people in your canoe? And so it was a really interesting conversation, because that was building this idea around the fact that if we as the adults don't even feel like we have the support we need to be successful, how in turn are we able to instill that for our students? So we needed our team to see that, like, man, I mean, some of our teachers were like, I feel like everyone's in my canoe. I don't know how to pick. And it's like, okay, that's great. That's great that you feel like we all are on your team and you can come to us at any time. And then, there were other people who were like, I just don't know who's in my canoe. I don't know who I've got. And we talked about that's how it is for our kids too. And so that's been really valuable. And through that conversation, I mean, it's much bigger than just the canoe, obviously, because we talked about trauma. We talked about we as the adults bring our own trauma into this conversation as well. We talk about what our students are dealing with and the trauma that they have. But having a cohesive, connected adult team makes it easier for then our kids to find their space as well. If mom and dad are fighting, it's real hard for kids to figure out where they fit in. But when mom and dad are getting along, there's nowhere to go. You can't really pit them against each other because they're all on the same page. And so here we are one collective group as a staff. We want to speak the same language. I'm going to defend you even if you're wrong in front of everyone else, but we'll talk about it, in my office, because I want to be in your canoe. And I want you to see that I'm back there paddling with you to help you get where you're going. And so that's been a really valuable thing that we've done together as a school that I think has played a part in helping kind of build an entire culture around this idea that everyone needs to find their place and what their role is.
Love that. That's powerful. Beth, how about you?
I feel like I think a leadership move for me is just that relational piece, and knowing that belonging isn't, it's not isolated. It can't live in isolation. It has to be part of your daily practice. So to be visible and have that expectation, and knowing that students and staff can have that clarity and consistency, I think is really important. So I think that's a good leadership. I think that's a good leadership move. And then advocacy. I think with your staff, I'm similar to Dr. Davis in the fact that I've picked my staff. We've been together for 10 years. So we have really connected experiences. We're on the same page when it comes to vision and mission of what we want for students to learn and grow. And I think that shared leadership it's just so powerful.
I love it. Advocacy is huge. It's amazing the difference it makes when you feel like you have somebody in your corner on your behalf. Dr. Brown, what are some things you're considering as a leader in your schools?
So really moving toward and things have kind of started to move in that direction as a state, but moving toward having all administrators actually teach one period a month for every content area, and really an opportunity to get in front of students, opportunity to build some level of understanding that no one's above anyone when it comes to the work that we have to do. A lot of times we have situations where teachers are saying, oh, you haven't been in the classroom and God knows how long, you don't know what we have to deal with. And really just an opportunity for students to see that we're willing to put in the work on their behalf. And to see them succeed, and that we aren't just the administrators or the disciplinarian or X, Y, and Z, that we're actually in the trenches with them, working toward their success. So that's really one thing from a leadership standpoint, because I think leading through service is really important to me, and something that I hope to instill upon really everybody, every adult in the building, but really trickle it down to students so that then when they become adults, they'll start to lead through service. And that kind of goes a little bit along with what Beth was talking about in terms of you're part of not only the school community, but you're part of your own community outside this building. So really kind of building that foundation to understand that you belong to us, but you belong to the community as well.
I love it. You're doing some incredible stuff there in your school. I love hearing these. This has been this webinar has had so many good ideas and tips that have been shared. I appreciate it. Our time has flown. Our hour's up. Here's what I want to do. We'll go just a couple minutes over if that's all right. But what I want to conclude on, I'm going to put up contact information. And huge thank you to the National Alternative Education Association. I'm going to shout out our friend Mary there for always getting me in contact with the best people. But here's what I want to end on. I want to give one more round of strategies. So I'm going to ask you to share just one practical strategy that somebody could take away right now to help improve the sense of student belonging in their schools? And then after that, Colby, I'm going to give you the opportunity just to shout out the NAEA one more time. For this one, let's go Beth, then Mark, then Colby. Just one practical strategy that you would recommend somebody could implement to improve a sense of student belonging in their school or classroom right now.
Okay, so I'd say maybe start small, but stay consistent. Maybe private redirection and public affirmation. So when you have something that needs to be, you need to talk to a student about something, make sure that it's in private, give them the expectation, and then give that public affirmation. And I think that helps your whole community build a sense of belonging and helps your climate and culture.
I love it. Great idea. And really, really wise reminder on the way we engage with students on that. Fully endorse that. Dr. Brown, you're next.
I would say one practical, just very small strategy is infuse into your program an opportunity for students, whether you call it persuasive or argumentative debates. We know, practically speaking, students love to push back at times, but really kind of teach them how to frame how they push back so the audience is actually listening and to actually persuade to their side, because I think that's a critical thinking skill that they would serve them well outside the building and moving into adulthood. So have spaces within your building where it's okay to engage in healthy debates where they can kind of go through their argumentative side or persuasive side, depending on what the issue is, just to kind of teach them, okay, this is how you can tighten this up. Because when they actually feel like you're teaching them a life skill, they're more likely to feel like you're really investing in them as a person, not just them as a student.
Love that. Absolutely agree. Another practice I will fully endorse. Great insight. Thank you, Mark. Dr. Davis.
Sorry, I was muted. I would say that, that we individually, if we're open and we're vulnerable, that helps us build relationships. And I truly believe the relationships are going to be the thing to help our kids be most connected.
Pretty straightforward, and 1,000% agree. The relationship changes everything. It should be the heartbeat of the approach. Colby, go ahead and speak on behalf of the NAEA. First of all, thank you always for representing the organization so well. Do you have any? I didn't even check beforehand. I know your conference is in the fall, but somebody mentioned in the comments, even if you're not in alternative education, that they recommend attending the NAEA conference. I fully agree with that. I'm telling you, I have learned so much from the great alternative educators that Mary continues to get me in contact with. She's the executive director. But anything on the horizon for you for your organization?
I want to add to what Abigail just said for a second there before I speak on that completely, and just say, no, you're right. She's right. There's so much we can learn from alternative ed. And the reason why is because we are always challenged to think outside the box and to be creative. And we're given the freedom to do it. And sometimes in traditional schools, they're not given as much freedom to be alternative in their thinking. And so sometimes just great ideas come from people who are forced to come up with great ideas. And so our organization serves as the national platform for alternative teachers all over the country. Now, the definition for alternative ed is really quite fluid. There's lots of different people that would consider what they do alternative ed. It really is anything outside of the traditional school setting. And so we work around the ideas of advocacy and inclusion and innovation in helping put people in the right places. Some cool things that are just happening for us now is we're actually starting a program where people can actually get a certification in alternative learning. We're working around, obviously, getting ready for our conference and having a day at the Capitol where we hope to meet with some legislators about what's going on with alternative ed. Super excited that we'll have the writer of Freedom, the Freedom Writers will be our keynote. That's hot off the press.
Miss Erin Gruelle, can I say the name?
Erin Gruelle will be our keynote speaker this year at our conference, and so we're super excited about that. And we have a lot going on. We really are trying to just make sure that we continue to be at the national. We just be a part of the national conversation of what is changing with alternative ed all the time.
Well, thank you. That was a great endorsement. I fully agree. And Mark, as the president-elect, I absolutely look forward to hopefully having you on some more of these, and excited to see what you're going to be doing, continuing this work. And Beth, I have a hunch we'll have you back as well. That you're going to be involved, I think, in this board work for quite a while as well. So huge thank you, huge round of applause to our panelists and to the NAEA for always providing the best. And then give yourselves, attendees, a round of applause. The comments in the chat were awesome today. You shared incredible content that complemented so nicely the discussion that was being had. Thank you all. Next one of these officially will be in 2 weeks. And I'm going to have an organization called Attendance Works on. We're going to be digging into chronic absenteeism. I'm really excited to hop on with them. They're right at the forefront of this, and I think it's going to be an awesome discussion. I'm going to put up contact info again, and then I'm going to play us out with a little bit of music. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for bringing your best, for doing the good work, and all the best. We're going to make it. We're going to make it through the spring. Great job. Thank you, everybody.